What's going on, guys? Jordan the Wolf back at it again with another scenario. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's finally here. Part 10 of What If Krillin Got the Buff Form. Alright, guys, let's get it on. Okay, so it's been quite a while. I do understand. It's been quite a minute. But let's do a quick recap of what's been going on as of late in the scenario. Okay, so guys, let's understand real quick. Where we last left off, it was the Buu Saga. And all our fighters, Android 18, Krillin, Tien, Yamcha, Piccolo, Gohan, Goku, all squared off against the fat pink blob known as Majin Buu after being awoken. But not just them, they also had to contend with Majin Vegeta being there, and reluctantly had to work together with Majin Vegeta in order to take out the fat monster. With their combined efforts of the Beam Clash, they would incinerate the fat monster. No Super Buu in the scenario, no Kid Buu. The Earth would be saved. But now, as there's a 4-year gap between the Buu Saga and Battle of Gods, there's going to be quite a little predicament of what our fighters are going to be doing throughout these 4 years. And actually, this is an interesting situation, as I had a few ideas in mind. Alright, so, cutting back on, we're going to enter the Buu Saga right here. The end of the Buu Saga, where we have Supreme Kai and Kibito, as they are quite grateful to our Z fighters being able to defeat this terrifying threat. And now, instead of the Supreme Kais just disappearing for all these years until the return of Beerus, there is a little something interesting I want to propose. The Supreme Kais ask if any of them would like to seek tutelage under the Kais as a reward for helping them with the threat of Majin Buu. And in this situation, there is a lot more volunteers who are quite interested in doing said training. For instance, we still have Gohan potentially looking into it, although he may be a little hesitant now that he doesn't see it as much necessary as prior, as this is before Gohan had his work-life balance, as we know. However, a few instantly jumped on the gun. First was Piccolo, then it was Tien, then Krillin, and then finally Gohan would join in. These 4 Z fighters would be heading off to the sacred world of the Kais, although they would each stay at different amount of times. Gohan staying, well, relatively the least, because he has to go back to his studies. But cutting to the sacred world of the Kais. Oh, priorly before I continue on, if you guys are not subscribed, please subscribe at the moment. It really helps the channel out. It would really help me grow. But anyways, I know what you guys are thinking. What about Yamcha? What is our little curious Z fighter going to be doing in the midst of this? Surely he's going to go training. Well, he has a lot more motivation than his original counterpart, not to say the very least. And so he will also be joining them on the planet. However, he does have a kid, and he's married to Bulma, so he's not going to stay away as long as, say, Vegeta would, because he's not that kind of guy who's going to stick years into training. So with 5 warriors upon the sacred world of the Kais, it would be quite interesting, as they initially all have to try their go at the Z sword. Each individual initially failing, but of course, for the sake of the scenario, Gohan will be the one who pulls the sword out. I could have said Krillin did it, but you know, I haven't really put a lot of focus on Gohan for the scenario, even though it is Krillin's scenario. But you know, I want to give Gohan something. And thus, as they're training, they're messing around with the sword, swinging heavily, each taking their turn with the sword. Tien even doing a cool thing where he did the 3 witches technique and would toss the sword to arm while swinging, practicing in a motion. They would all then hear a certain burst as, just like in canon, Supreme Kai throws a block of Kachin and it would destroy the Z sword, snapping it in half. And a big poof would appear, as they would all see an elderly Kai, of all things. So, as they would all be introduced to the Elder Kai, they would all get the rundown and the gist. As he would be grateful regardless that he was freed from the sword. After all, if you're trapped in an object for millions of years, you'd be quite grateful to be let out. So, during the first year and 2 of this training on the Supreme Kai world, they'd be all training their butts off And with Elder Kai here, a proposition was created as he would offer each individual warrior to unlock their potentials. And to say the very least, some fighters were initially hesitant, but some were so gung-ho to do it. Gohan, seeing as he's not wanting to always consistently train, but he has better motivation for it, he would still be willing to do the ultimate transformation. He would still do the ultimate ritual. And then followed suit was Piccolo, then Tien, then Krillin, and then finally Yamcha. Each ritual taking over the course of one day after the other. As all of them were amazing. All of them were powered up with their potentials. Now granted, each individual warrior's potential varies. We can't really say for sure. But we know what it did for Gohan, putting him above Super Saiyan 3 Goku. Now, we can't exactly say our human warriors have the same amount of potential locked away. But at the very least, we can at least give them the baseline of Saiyan, Super Saiyan 3 at the moment. But with their multipliers and such, they'll be beyond that, including also Piccolo, as all of them will spend the next 2 years training upon the sacred world of the Kais, stretching out their muscles and really testing it to the limits, including stacking Kaioken upon the ultimate form, Ultimate Kaioken, for the Earthlings and the Namekian. Gohan, meanwhile, did not exactly have access to Kaioken, as he primarily had focused on Super Saiyan. But with his rapid hybrid potential, his ultimate form alone would be more than enough to contend. As each warrior would hone their craft, and even practicing a few techniques they haven't in a while, such as Spirit Bomb. Although most of them were not none of them really had evil in their heart per se. Not to say everyone here is pure of heart. As, for example, I don't expect everybody to be on the Nimbus. But what I'm saying is, they're practicing their craft. However, a unique threat would come to their doorstep midway through, as soon they would all return back to Earth, where they would arrive at the newly set up for Mr. Satan, is what I would be saying had he had it in the scenario, but he would not, as most of them would not be aware of Majin Buu and the hotel would not be constructed. Not to say he wouldn't attempt to make a hotel, but he's not as famous, and if he were to have a hotel, it would have his own money in the backing. But for the sake of the situation, we're just gonna say it's at the hotel anyways. But no, realistically, it's gonna be a Capsule Corp in this situation, guys. We're gonna have a nice feast, a nice banquet, or nice reunion at Capsule Corp. And so, quickly, the situation would be different as all the individuals would be partaking, and then they would hear a weird rumbling as a ship would arrive. Tarble and his wife Gur would arrive on Capsule Corp, at the shock of everybody seeing a Saiyan again. However, one that was not particularly perturbed was none other than the prince himself, Vegeta. So, understand, this is not the same Vegeta from our normal timeline. This Vegeta was primarily trapped for many years in the rice cooker and was turned into a Majin. In this situation, he did help them defeat Majin Buu, however, such as he would be willing to help the Earthlings fight Frieza, enemy of my enemy situation. So now he's around, but he's not the same guy per se. More of not, at best you could say he's the niceness levels maybe Namek, or at least working on it towards Android Saga. He's getting better. He's not the same as his Saiyan Saga counterpart per se after being a couple years on Earth, but still, it's taken a bit. Anyways, he would still talk to Tarble and be pleasantly surprised that he's married, though he'd make a slight comment on his weakling brother. However, the real situation at hand is this. They'd bring it up. Otto and Kato would be chasing Tarble, as they were both individually as strong as Frieza. However, we never got a true confirmation of which form of Frieza. I had always assumed they may have been wanting to talk about first form Frieza, but at the same time, I believe it has to be like final form Frieza levels of strength. As, well, if not them, I would say individually right now they may be first form Friezas, but when they fuse, which will be covered later on, he is quite a potent force because he was able to take on Gotenks, and we'll talk about that scaling later. So, after the brief reunion of brothers, soon 2 more ships would arrive at Capsule Corp's property as Otto and Kato, a red and blue alien respectively, would step out of their ships as they'd be looking down Tarble. However, just like the original canon, they did not initially start the fight. In fact, a lot of them, such as Goku, wanted to do the turnip lottery this time. Radish lottery. Just like the movie of Yosun Goku and his friends. However, in this scenario, I'm going to have it do a little different of who pulls out that turnip. And who's going to pull it out? You kind of know who's going to pull it out. So, they would all arrive at the Radish farm. At the Sun family's residence. So, they would now each pull out their individual turnips. Radish. I interchange a lot. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. So, as they pull it out, the winner in this situation is going to be Akka. Akka's going to take on none other than Krillin. Okay, guys. It's going to be a quite fun fight. No, I'm just joshing. No, but for real, Krillin will be stepping up later within the fight. However, in this situation, they actually do want to give the kids a fair chance. However, there's a slight difference here. Trunks is a full human in this situation. He's Yamcha's kid in this situation, not Vegeta's. However, despite not having Super Saiyan, his father taught him Kaioken. And he would stand alongside a Saiyan Goten as they would attempt to take on the 2 aliens. Now, however, without Trunks being a Super Saiyan per se, it is kind of rougher on both of them. Yes, Goten is stronger than he was, but Trunks is a bit weaker than where he was. It's a bit of a weird balancing act, as Goten was able to train with his father and his brother throughout 7 years, while Trunks only has the potential of a human, and not a hybrid. Although he may have great multipliers for all we know, it'd still be Kaioken and not be at 50. So as the boys have to pull back, then a marvelous sight as soon as they stop colliding within the air, as both Otto and Kato took off their respective scouters and set them to the side, as a magical glow began to envelop the both of them, as fusion could be heard. Soon, an enveloping light would cover the area, and now a massive purple warrior would step out, simply dubbing himself Akka! And now, granted, so many of the warriors wanted to cut they wanted to cut their teeth on this warrior. They wanted to really have a good fight. But in this situation, I'm gonna have it be Krillin, because you already know what's the next arc. The heavy focus on the Saiyans. I wanted to give the Earthling at least some focus. So, Krillin would be the one who steps up. Granted, Goku really wants to fight this guy. Like, he really does. And in fact, he attempted to trick Krillin just as he would Vegeta in the movie, making him point away. However, Krillin would be able to outsmart Goku and trick Goku, as he would take on the purple fusion, tearing off his orange uniform, as everyone would begin to see Krillin's muscles swell at the sight, as then bulk up. He has entered his buff form, as he proceeds to charge after Akka, as a heavy collision could be heard as it rang out throughout Capsule Corp, enveloping the area. A massive shockwave began to destroy some of the area. And just like the movie, Yajirobe, Yamcha, Puar, they'd all be saving respective people, getting them out of harm's way. Give them a great focus. Krillin would launch a heavy attack at Akka, smashing his fist directly into his chest. His Akka would be sent back a bit. However, Akka would return in kind, sending an even stronger fist, as he'd begin to collide. Now, for a quick reference how strong Akka exactly is, let me give you guys a baseline to understand where he's at. Okay, so to give you guys initial reference, Otto and Kato, these individuals, the fusion was able to beat down Goten and Trunks respectively in canon. they are able to contend with Gotenks, and we already know how strong Gotenks is, being able to at least take on Majin Buu to a degree. Also survived a hit from Super Saiyan Gotenks, and got blasted away from a Super Saiyan 1 and a Buu Saga Goku. This is about 2 years after. So essentially, at the best you could say for this individual is he's able to take on Super Saiyan level enemies from the Buu Saga. So let's just say he's a tough cookie, to say the very least. He is not exactly some weakling. So Krillin would actually have his hands full a bit, begin to take him on. Initially, just remaining just in his buff form, bouncing around. As he would charge up in his fist, everyone could hear a crackling effect, as if lightning began to strike. As they would hear, "Shocking Kamehameha!" As a yellow beam would charge forward, blasting towards Akka, as Akka would fire up a green mouth blast and fire off the projectile in order to collide with the Shocking Kamehameha, causing a massive explosion, only for Akka to charge forward and clothesline Krillin through a building. Bulma at this point would start be shouting at Krillin to get his head in the game and actually finish the fight before they destroy her entire house. But in this situation, she would have something rigged up similarly, at least, to what future Trunks Saga Bulma may have, a little energy projection field, just in case. Regardless, though, they began to bounce around. Akka firing off massive green energy blasts, charging up projectiles, trying to bullhammer him, like ramming his elbow into Krillin. As then Krillin would catch him at one of these instances, and everyone began to see steam rise from Krillin's bodies. His muscles began to pulsate a bit, as everyone would just hear, "Kaioken!" As a massive red surge began to fill the area, as Krillin would now enter a Kaioken times 50 upon his buff form, absolutely raging on, as he would smash his fist into Akka. Akka would then begin to charge up his most powerful technique, called in the movie simply as Super Wahaha no Ha, as a massive green energy sphere began to form in his hands, as he would then put it up into his mouth, as it began to project large amounts of green energy blasts. However, he would condense it and then envelop the area with a massive green energy blast, firing off his Super Wahaha no Ha. As Krillin would then take a stance, everyone could hear it, as another crackling could be heard, and briefly everyone could hear Kaioken times 70! As a Kaioken times 70 would bulk his body up tremendously, flares up even further to a Kaioken times 80, as his hands began to enlarge a bit, as he began to separate his hands more and more. And first time in forever, we're introduced to a new technique. This is the Super Shocking Kamehameha. His hands envelop larger. His hands began to shake a bit. He began to hurt himself a bit because the amount of shocking energy that was radiating off his hands. As then, the two beams would collide. A massive green energy sphere and a bright yellow beam. As then, Krillin pushing him back, his beam would envelop Akka. It sounded like freaking a thunderstorm out there. It sounded like a massive thunder strike, smashing into Akka, as Akka would be felled. 2 years later, Battle of Gods would commence. Now, we'd quickly delve into it, like 2 years of more training have occurred, and Tarble remained to stay on planet Earth with his wife now, as they set up they got a bit of residence at Capsule Corp alongside Vegeta, as Yamcha and Bulma would be gracious enough to at least host them. 2 years had passed. The party would have commenced as it would for Bulma's birthday. Dragon Balls collected, all this, etc. Now, things are a little bit different now, as Krillin, Piccolo, Yamcha, Tien, and Gohan had trained and got ultimate forms. Being that as it may, Gohan, being Gohan, may slack a little bit, but not completely, as he did actually at least somewhat keep up with his training now, as Akka reminded him, hey, there is threats coming to this planet at any time. Of course, now we see the arrival of Beerus, God of Destruction. And where would he land? Of course, is King Kai's world, where Goku's at. However, an interesting situation occurs in the scenario upon King Kai's world. As he began to collide with Son Goku, in this situation, does not have a Super Saiyan 3 to rely on. So what does Goku do? In this situation, initially, he can't take him on in base. He goes up to Super Saiyan. Not enough. He goes up to Super Saiyan 2. Not enough. The God of Destruction was quite perturbed. He was expecting a Super Saiyan God. However, briefly, Son Goku would revert back to Super Saiyan. At the confusion of the God, because it's weaker than a Super Saiyan 2. However, as the golden aura began to radiate, he would clench his fists further, tightening them, and then he was reminded upon how Krillin would stack up on his buff on quite a lot. So for a brief moment, we would hear, Super Kaioken! As a red aura began to envelop the Super Saiyan. As he would push it up times past 4, and then push it past times 10, and would begin to take on Lord Beerus. As a red blazing comet would speed around King Kai's world. Not to say this is easy by any means. In fact, this is absolutely terrible upon Goku's body. It's absolutely tearing his muscles apart as he would charge forward, trying to land some hits. And I will say, at the very best, he does about as well as Vegeta's rage moment would occur, as his multipliers would be higher, trying to fire off a Super Kaioken Kamehameha times 10. Be that as it may, Beerus would still ultimately win. Beerus would arrive upon planet Earth then after. Vegeta being there, absolutely terrified. Tarble, by contrast, well, not by contrast, with a bit of news from Vegeta, would also be terrified. Supreme Kai, Elder Kai, all terrified. Earthlings, not so much, only because they do not know who he is until being told. However, there is no Majin Buu in this situation, so no one's exactly going to piss off Beerus. So he's having a good time, he's eating, but initially is a bit perturbed and a bit miffed because he wants to know what the Super Saiyan God is. So after a bit, once Son Goku would return, after being healed, getting healed up, I'll say this at the very least, I forgot to mention, Goku's stronger in this situation than he was in canon, but, it's Beerus. I can't really write to be competitive. It's freaking Beerus. He's still not there yet. Goku would bring up an interesting situation and a proposition. Let him summon Shenron. And I'm not gonna lie, I did want to have the Z Fighters fight Beerus, but we kind of know what was going to happen. And there's not exactly a real trigger to piss him off. So, Shenron would be summoned. A ritual would be declared. As all the Saiyans look upon one another, as they initially counted only 5. Because remember, Trunks is not a Saiyan in this situation, he's a human. Tarble, Vegeta, Goten, Gohan, and Goku all would come to the ritual point. And then Videl would announce her pregnancy. So, I know, the hardest part is, I'm not gonna lie, for this ritual, I think Vegeta, with the 2 extra years, he's a bit better than where he was off. From at least where... Now, I can't say he's exactly as kind as in a Buu saga, but I'm gonna say for the sake of the situation, the ritual does work, and it will be used on Goku, of course. This is a stronger Goku than the original canon. Hell, this Goku, I guess if I was going to say, at least easily twice as strong, if not 3 times. He's much stronger than where he stood off. So, the godly fighters would take their places, as they'd soon collide within space, radiating their massive auras. But at the end, we know Son Goku would lose to Lord Beerus, and he would offer training to Goku, who of course would take it. And of course, Gohan would also be offered by his father to come tag along. However, the thing is, Gohan trying to figure it out. And he would come along. However, he would only stay around half the time, and half the time he would ask Goku or Whis to teleport him back to Earth during the training. Now, during the year gap, people would be training intensely, and some people would be settling themselves. Tien would be setting up his training school, and individuals such as even Yajirobe and Chatsu, understanding the major threat upon their world that could have posed, would actually begin to train again. And to go delving deep later, I think this is where I'm actually going to cut the scenario right now. What do you guys think? Is there some things I may have glossed over? What are things you wanted to see in the next part? What should Tarble do in this situation? Should Tarble stick around? What should Android 18 do? What should our hero and protagonist Krillin do now that he has an ultimate form? Now that being said, I am Jordan the Wolf. I just want to say, you guys have any questions or you guys have any ideas to pitch for the scenario, please let me know. I will read them in the comments. Whether or not I'll use them, we're gonna see. That being said, yeah, I'm rambling a bit. I do apologize. It's been a while. This is the first What If Krillin Got the Buff form for the whole new year, so I just wanted to make sure I cover my bases. Anyways, next part is the resurrection of Frieza, ROF, in part 11. Jordan the Wolf, signing out.